Yes, today we're going to talk about this noted genius, John Ericsson. And John Ericsson is probably most famous for the Monitor. However, from an early age, he was an inventor. He's a tinker. He tried to make things. In fact, when he was 7 years old, he made a miniature sawmill that actually worked. And so you realize that it takes a different type of person. He was born in Langenstaden, farmland, Sweden, on 31 July 1803. So his father was a very noted mining engineer and also surveyor. However, he speculated, lost a lot of money, ended up being director of blasting for building the Gotha Canal. Now, his brother is actually going to be chief engineer and designer of that very canal, and which this is how Ericsson looked probably when he went to England. That's the earliest picture we have it. This is the Gotha Canal. As you can see, during the age of canals that really populated England and all industrial nations to further the type of transport. So John Ericsson actually is, at age 14, he becomes an ensign in the Gemlands Jaggers, a Swedish unit. He learns the trade of surveying and other types of engineering. Now, he does not go to college, right? He's a hands-on learner. And so as a result of that, he will be an ensign, age 14. By age 17, he is promoted to lieutenant. So while he's there, he surveys the north of Sweden, which is a desolate area, but he goes on that project. He's still tinkering with making little engines, and so he decides to move to England. Okay? This is a big step for John Ericsson, and I have to say, he's a topographical engineer. He develops a heat engine when in Sweden. He also, the heat engine used the steam from fires as a propellant. And so it really didn't work well. But anyway, in fact, probably half of Ericsson's inventions were crazy concepts. And I hate to say that about the designer of the Monitor, but it is very true. So he goes to England, and in 1828, he forms a partnership with John Braithwaite, and they produce this engine here, which is known as the Novelty. This is for the Liverpool and Manchester Railroad, and basically they're trying to pick out which type of steam engine they're going to use. They have a race, and with a competitor known as the Rocket, and the Rocket wins the race because it doesn't have boiler problems. Actually, the faster the two steam engines was the Novelty, but they kept having the boiler malfunction. No boiler, no steam, and no move engine, I guess is how the story goes. And so he's going to, it was called the Rainhill Trials, and it was really a major event. Newspapers from the world watch this. Now, he continues to develop engines. This is one of, he will build 4 different engines. This is probably his most famous. This is for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, once again. This engine called the Wilhelm, because it eventually goes to Germany, but is actually named for King William IV, who is uncle to Victoria. In fact, she succeeds him. So this is the age of industrialization, and so this is pretty good. Now, he does all sorts of little remarkable innovations. Like, I think one of my favorite things is he builds a steam fire engine, which actually, in this terrible blaze that took place in London, his steam engine is going to, or pump, is going to be able to put out this terrible fire. And everyone says, wow, this is the thing of the future. However, the laddie boys, or the volunteer firefighters said, well, we don't like that, and so it didn't really take off like it should have, because it was actually a far more effective way, and it proved itself in the fires that it fought. So that's pretty great. But Ericsson is tinkering with everything. I think one of his first successful, now his railroad engines are successful. However, they don't catch on. In other words, he's from Sweden. So when you're in England, what do the English think about foreigners? They don't trust them. And so Ericsson is not the most popular man in England. This is a water condenser, right, that he invents. He invents one of the first ones. It does not take off on a business fashion. And so as a result of that, actually, Ericsson will have to go to debtor's prison. Inventing all these little machines and everything takes money, and no one's buying them. So, Ericsson ends up on the wrong end of the stick. He also does the first pressure fathometer and pressure activated fathometer. And whoops, I don't want to go there yet. And as a result of that, it's the first deep testing of the depths of the ocean. Actually, John Mercer Brooke will invent a more superior one that can do deep water miles below the surface. And that is the one that is used by Matthew Fontaine Maury to map the canyons underneath the ocean. And that allowed them to lay the transatlantic cable. So this little device is very important. Ericsson, however, doesn't do well with it. And so I have to say, he then, we see that steam power has come, right? And steam power, we first, as you all know, we use paddle wheels. And a second, there's a paddler. So we'll get to this story in due course, but the paddle wheel was the most effective way of moving a steamship. All our first warships that had steam power, like the USS Mississippi, the Michigan, and so forth, all used these paddle wheels. Problem with a paddle wheel is, as we just saw from the Great Western, if I have a cannon, I know how to stop your ship. And, one blast into your paddle wheel, and paddle box as they would call it, and you'd be virtually dead in the water or go in circles. And so and your machinery for this is on top. If you're here at the museum, you can go out and see part of what's called a walking beam engine, and so that's exposed. So I have limited gun firepower on these ships because the paddle takes up so much room. I'm vulnerable with my paddle and my engine. And so John Ericsson will come up with a screw propeller concept. We have here at the Monitor Center his first concept, which is a little different than this. This is the Monitor's, of course, screw propeller. And so I have to tell you now, so the Royal Navy is very interested in having these screw propellers because that makes your ship somewhat shot-proof. In other words, boilers are dangerous, shot going through them. The engines themselves can be destroyed. So they put that technology below the waterline so you can't shoot at it. And that's the real meaning for military purposes of the screw propeller. Now they had, now he gets funding from the American Council, a man known as Francis Ogden, and he will actually build the steam screw-powered tugboat known as the Francis B. Ogden. Now, the Royal Navy called it the Flying Devil because of its speed. However, in trials, it has errors, it breaks down basically, or the ship does because of engine problems, and this other ship wins, meaning Ericsson screw propeller does not win contracts, okay, once again. However, one person who's there is going to be this man, Robert Stockton. He's from a very wealthy New Jersey family. He's, of course, a member of the U.S. Navy. And he recognized that screw propeller really needs to be in all future ships. So he convinces Ericsson to come back to the United States with him. Now, he's very influential. He knows the politicians, the congressmen, the businessmen, everybody he needs to have contacts to make this screw propeller an effective business. So, but they have to prove it. And so Stockton will work with John Tyler, President of the United States, right, his excellency, and he will get a contract to build what they wanted to be a frigate, but instead it was a sloop. And that ship is going to be known as the Princeton. Now, the Princeton has, gets laid down in October of 1842. It takes 2 years to build the ship, basically. And because it's got a lot of novel activities going on. Number one, you got the screw propeller. And not only do you have one, you have two. So you have to learn about pitches. If you go back and look at, see how the blades of the propeller are curved? That's how you work with water, not to disturb the other propeller working next to it. Now, Monitor only has one of these, but many ships will have twin propellers, and that gave you greater endurance for your engine. You actually got to use all of the steam power that's coming out of the engine, because so many of these new engines waste power because they have no place to send it. Transmissions were bad back then. I think in the class of the USS Merrimack, when it's a steam screw frigate, produced 3,200 horsepower. But the time it got to the propeller, it's only producing approximately 400. So all that power is lost in the transmission system. So we want to solve that. Ericsson does by using twin propellers. He also he uses a 6-bladed propeller, which is unusual. It enables the pitch to actually work together with both of them. The smokestack is a telescoping smokestack. Okay. One of the big troubles is during a battle, guess what you want to do to a steamship? I want to blow holes in the funnel, because then I don't have draft, and then my engine won't go fast enough. So as a result of this, that is a unique improvement to shipbuilding. He also develops a improved rangefinder and improved carriages or recoil systems, which is a big leap forward, especially for pivot guns. Because Ericsson not only invented engines, trains, he also did cannons. And so during this time period, we're going through this great evolution of ordnance. In other words, we had smoothbore guns firing cannonballs. Now, by the 1840s, we have developed what's known as the shell gun. Shell gun, of course, sends an explosive shell into the side of the ship, which creates a ragged hole. The shell, when it explodes, sends sparks, so your ship's going to burn and also going to sink because of the ragged hole. So back in the old days, you know, the victory during the Battle of Trafalgar was holed several times, but they had sabots that they run through the lower decks and staunch the cannon hole, so to speak. And so Ericsson is going to invent what is known as the orator. It is a 12-inch shell gun. In fact, the largest shell gun in existence. Now, this is, and actually, well, let me go back. So when this first is launched in Brooklyn, it will then do a race with the Great Western. Great Western, the largest ship, 692 feet in length. It's also very fast because it has screw propellers and what? Paddle wheels. So, and who wins the race? The Princeton. Yeah. So that's a big deal. So everyone thinks, oh my gosh, this is the modern world is being shown in our ships. So this is what is called the orator. He builds it at Mersey Iron Works in England. He will use what is called a built-up wrought iron band system. So basically, when you build the engine, the gun, and this is probably better, you can see that you have to have more powder to fire the projectile, right? And as a result of that, you have greater pressures, right, within the gun tube itself. So how to get rid of that pressure is that you have to do the banding. And basically, Ericsson uses a hoop banding system where his bands are almost 12 inches. You know, he puts 10 of them on so that stops. See, the gun itself is going to be a cast gun. And then they have to drill it out, and then they, you know, have to, cast iron is suitable for cracking very easily. It's not a safe metal when you're building cannon at that time. So as a result of that, Ericsson does these hoops, which really were great. You can see them here, right? And that's supposed to stabilize the gun when firing. Ericsson thought, yeah, this is the great thing. In fact, when he comes to America, he changed the name of the gun from orator to Oregon. Why? He hates the British, you know, and so he'll show that several times during his career. So because there's a dispute over the Oregon territory. So his claim is this gun will be superior than anything the English have, and so that means we're going to be able to solve in America's favor the Oregon dispute. So, this gun did not do that. However, John Stockton, who you remember, right? I don't want to go there yet. So John Stockton, who brought Ericsson to United States, realizes that Ericsson is gaining a lot of fame. And Stockton, if you know a little bit about his career, he is a egotist, he's a narcissist, you know, all those bad words. You know, he's that, you know. And so he, number one, he says to Ericsson, well, you know, your gun's not that good. And so he makes his own shell gun, however, it's 13-inch shell gun. However, its banding is inadequate. In fact, Ericsson says that gun is unsafe. Stockton says, oh, you're just jealous because my gun's bigger than yours, and so, this is terrible stuff for Ericsson. But so Stockton is telling Ericsson, just complete your work and so forth. Well, what's going to happen is Stockton is going to take the Princeton down to the Washington Navy Yard. This is a big deal because show off to Congress and everyone the strengths of this new style of ship. You get more appropriations, so forth. Now, Stockton says we're going to leave the dock at 5 in the afternoon. However, Stockton leaves the dock at 12. So when Ericsson gets to the dock, he sees the Princeton going away. Why? Stockton did not want to share the glory with Ericsson. So Ericsson's a little peculiar about this, but what will happen is, this is one of my favorite stories, that, so they're on February, they listed as 28, but it's actually February 29. It's a leap year, right? But it's recorded as 28. So what happens is they get on the deck, all these congressmen, the elite of Washington, they're at a big party. They're drinking a lot of champagne. It's fun to fire guns when you're drinking champagne. Now, actually, John Tyler's on board. However, he's not going to be on deck when some of these guns are being fired. He takes Julia Gardner, whose father is a congressman from Long Island, on a special tour of the captain's cabin, right? And so, kid you not. And so all of a sudden, they said, let's fire that gun again. They're all happy and a little intoxicated. And so, sure enough, they do fire it again. It burst, as you can see. Did not have sufficient, could not control the stress to the cast iron barrels. So as a result of that, the gun explodes. Let me just tell you, the people that are going to be killed during this event is going to include the Secretary of the Navy, the Captain Beverly Kenyon, who was chief of the Bureau of Docks and Shipbuilding. Also Thomas Gilmer, Secretary of the Navy, Abel Upshur, Secretary of State. I mean, this is terrible. Robert Stockton himself, you can see him there with his hat flying off his head, is also wounded. This is horrific. And everyone says, what happened? And of course, Robert Stockton says it's Ericsson's fault. Now remember, Tyler is down with Julia Gardner. Julia Gardner's father is killed. And so when the explosion takes place, she goes, wow. But they go up and she looks and sees on the deck her father dead. She faints into John Tyler's arms. 6 months later, they get married. So convenient. But anyway, this puts back the development of shell guns in the U.S. Navy drastically. We have to pay Henry Paxenhans to use his design for a shell gun until John Dahlgren comes along and develops first the 9-inch shell gun, which is the soda bottle looking item. So Ericsson is now miserable. He's miserable because everyone hates him. In fact, the Navy will refuse to pay him for his work on the Princeton. This makes Ericsson once again destitute. So as a result of that, he forms a partnership with this man, Cornelius Delamater. And he is, of course, owner of a major ironworks on Staten Island. And so Ericsson starts developing little types of items like this, what is called a caloric engine. So it forces hot air instead of steam to work the engine. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, this is the cat's meow. Ericsson hopes that everyone will take it on. Several people buy the engine, put it on ships. However, I have to say that it did not work efficiently. In fact, he claimed it would make 8 knots. Guess what? It did not. And in fact, it was lucky to make 5 knots. Great concept on paper, but not effective in use. So here's this brilliant person coming up with these unique little inventions, and none of them are practical. I mean, I would say the condenser is practical, but they make better ones, and so his is not popular. In fact, he's not a financial success. He gets married during this time, and he hates his wife hates him, so they are separated within a year of being married. They have 1 child, and Ericsson's basically surviving thanks to solar heat collector, another great idea, but not practical in the modern world. This is the one engine that is somewhat better than others. This is the vibrating lever steam engine. And so you can see the levers that will turn the crank as steam goes through the steam box. And this is a fairly effective, on the USS Monitor could make 7 knots. So we think about the engine, we say, wow, that's pretty good because it's small, so it was very efficient. One of the big problems about engines during the Civil War era is that we don't have, they're big, massive engines. In fact, some weigh several tons. They take up all sorts of space. The engines, there are several different designs that are out there. Generally, Benjamin Isherwood's design is used by the U.S. Navy. There's some other crackpots that come up with bad designs that don't work. And actually, they're on one ship, the engine didn't work so badly. John Lomer Worden and Naval Construction Board says, the engines are bad, take them out and use it for space for it being a store ship. So it'd be a sailing store ship. So you can understand these engines need to be more efficient. They need to be less in weight, and they need to use less coal. Because, as you know, you got to carry all your coal with you, and so that's why they have certain times during the Civil War, they're coaling ships. In other words, transferring coal into the other ship. So that is, what he does. Now, I got to tell you, as you know, the United States divides itself. The Confederates are the first to start building an ironclad, and that is the CSS Virginia, or eventually will be the CSS Virginia. There are no secrets during the Civil War, so of course it appears in Northern papers, oh, look what the Confederates are doing, and the Union has no ship to match it. So as a result of that, they put out an RFP in the newspaper asking for designs, okay? Now, in other words, Confederates can read that same newspaper, so they know the Federals are up to something. So one person who submitted a design is a man known as Cornelius Bushnell. Bushnell is from Hartford, Connecticut. He's friends with Gideon Welles, who happens to be the Secretary of the Navy, and as a result of that, he comes up with a concept, well, he doesn't come up with the concept, Samuel Pook does, known as the Galena, with tumble-hold sides, 3 inches or 3 layers of 1-inch plate. They actually have a ½ inch of rubber, which they decide they don't need. One person put a design in during this time to the ironclad board, as we call it, that the ship was made of rubber. And the idea was that a shell would come and bounce off the side of the ship, you know. The trouble is, a shell would like to explode on the side, rubber ships sink, so that didn't work. Yeah, so, you know, the big thing is that Ericsson, well, when there are other designs, one is known as the New Ironside, which looks like a French floating battery. So it's a casemated ironclad. And then they're looking for another one. Well, when Cornelius Bushnell makes his appearance at the ironclad board, now he's got the deal because of Gideon Wells, but still, you know, he's got to go through the formalities, and they say, well, is this ship going to be stable because of how the hull is designed? And Bushnell says, well, I don't know. And so he goes, leaves the ironclad board. He meets John Winslow, who says, well, this is a crazy guy up in Brooklyn, John Ericsson, who can tell you whether the ship is stable. So he goes, sees good old Ericsson. Ericsson says, yeah, your boat is stable because of this and that. However, look at what I got. And he pulls out of his closet this cardboard model of what will eventually be known as the Monitor. It has kind of a curved deck, a sloping deck. It has a turret. Nothing else is really seen on the ship. So it's going to be armed with 2 guns. Actually, he submits it to Napoleon, Louis Napoleon, Emperor of France. Well, he does that not to the English, because he hates the English, but he wants the French, who are the typical enemies of the English, to have this modern thing. Now, this model has what are called hydrostatic guns. And so you get water pressure up, and that is going to be released, sending the projectile. Actually, his hydrostatic engine is is designed to work underwater like a torpedo. But, you know, it's a concept in his head, is not anything real and never becomes real. So Bushnell says, wow, this is a great idea. Why didn't you turn it in to the ironclad board? Ericsson says, they don't like me there, which they don't. And so Bushnell takes the model in. They look at the model and go, oh, wow, this is great. And, you know, however, you know, it's not stable. It can't float. It, you know, made of iron. And when you throw a piece of wood on the water, what does it do? Floats. Throw a piece of iron on the water, what does it do? It sinks. So this thing is made of all iron. Everyone goes, oh, you can't have that, right? And so they tell Bushnell, well, you know, you need to go tell us how stable the thing is, how this thing is going to work. Well, Bushnell goes back, talks to Ericsson, you know, says, they love your idea. I just couldn't explain it as well as you. And so now, meanwhile, Abraham, Bushnell gives a call to Gideon Wells, who then calls Abraham Lincoln, you need to see this ship. Actually goes in the ironclad boardroom. He sees the model of the ship. He goes, you know, kind of reminds me of the country girl when she first puts her foot in a silk stocking and exclaims, there's really something in it. Ironclad board goes, well, wow, you know, we have to pay attention to this. Also, Ericsson comes in, and they said, what are you doing here? He says, well, I thought you liked my design, and I needed to answer some of your questions. We don't have any questions. We think the ship is a death trap, and that we don't like it, and we don't like you. Well, Ericsson, who's an egotist himself, he gets his high horse up and explains how effective the ship can be, goes into detail about his defensive qualities. And so they, at the end, Hiram Paulding, who's on the board, he's a flag officer. He says, I learned more about navigation in this past half hour than I've known throughout my 30 years at sea. So, wow, Ericsson had something going on. So he gets the contract. He forms it with several business people in New York, including this man, John Griswold, who later becomes a congressman and later becomes on the Committee on the Conduct of Naval Affairs. So he is the man that means why we build so many monitors. There's another one of the partners, Bushnell is a partner, and this is the end result. Now, at first it's called Ericsson's Battery, and as Ericsson's Battery, that's kind of a dull name, and so Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Gustavus Vasa Fox, says, hey, you need to name your boat. And he says, I want to call it the Monitor, because it will be a monitor to those secessionists in the South, and furthermore, it will be a warning to the lords of the Admiralty. So he hates the English. And so they call it the Monitor, right? There's only one monitor. All the other ships are going to be monitors, plural. So with different names. So this is, pretty amazing. And and actually this ship is actually going to be called the Little Ship That Saves the Nation here in Hampton Roads after the CSS Virginia comes out and sinks 2 major Union warships, damages to others, sinks 2 transports. I mean, it is a naval revolution, and all the Federals have coming to stop it is this little ship. In fact, when they talk about what happened in Hampton Roads in the cabinet meeting, actually Edwin Stanton says, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And Wells says calmly, look, we have our own ironclad coming down from New York. And Stanton says, how many guns does it have? Because the Virginia had 10 guns. And when Wells says 2, Stanton goes, oh my gosh, we are lost. He keeps looking out the window expecting the Virginia to be in the Potomac. It can't get there. But anyway, that's the fear that ship did. So as a result of that, the Monitor, despite tremendous flaws, you can't see out of it to effectively aim your guns. You have limited firepower. It's unseaworthy. It almost sinks twice on the way down to Hampton Roads. So as a result of that, the ship, however, is in the right place in the right time. And so Ericsson has over 100 patentable items on this ship. He actually patents 37, gives most of those patents to the Navy. My favorite patent is the pressurized toilet, that's another story for another time. So this becomes the symbol of the U.S. Navy during the war. We build 63 ironclads in the north, 47 are monitors, okay? So you can see. And this is an unsafe ship to be in, to tell you the truth. It's really designed for harbor defense. It's like all of Ericsson's concepts. They look great. In fact, on the Caloric engine, I have to tell you, the Caloric engine will provide, this is a quote, the most important mechanical invention yet ever conceived by the human mind, and one that will confer greater benefits on the events of life than anything that has ever preceded it. The engine, indeed, is a regeneration that will inspire others to use hot air to put their engines to work. Right. That is, Caloric is using radiant heat. Guess what? It doesn't work, but everyone is impressed by Ericsson himself, his brilliance. So Ericsson, of course, will go on to build several monitors. They all lack the same problem. They don't have proper firepower. They're not really seaworthy. And the U.S. Navy does not get rid of its last monitor until 1937. So, of course, this is the monument to Ericsson. His most famous invention is, of course, the monitor. Monitors are built throughout Europe. The English build them, the Russians build them, because they're actually perfect for harbor defense and riverine action. But they just can't go to sea. And that's the big downside. And every warship really needs to go to sea. That's the flaw with it is, yeah, it's great when it's in New York Harbor, but when it goes down to Hampton Roads, it has to go to sea to get to the other harbor. So that's when it comes into problem. And when you read about every one of these monitors going south, they always get hit by some type of storm. They all almost sink. John Rogers said about the Weehawken, "Oh, it was the smoothest ride I've ever had." Well, he lied. They have to throw over ammunition, coal, everything like that. But still, the brilliance of Ericsson to conceive this totally new type of warship. I mean, the turret alone was not his idea. Actually, it was invented by Thomas Tinby for land use. They buy the rights to his patent because they're putting it on a ship. But by being a revolving turret, it has the ability to fire in about 180 degrees. Now, Ericsson tells everyone it can fire in 360 degrees, but when you kind of take a look right here, no, it can't. Because look at those cannons, they're facing the smokestacks, the blowers, and the pilot house. So, it did not have that great of fire range. But nevertheless, this ship is the style of ship that's going to help the Union win the Civil War at sea. Not because it's a great blockading ship, but because what it can do in harbors, right? It can't defeat forts, but it surely is shot-proof. And the greatest example is the Battle of Charleston, which I'm going to talk about next year. So you'll have to wait till then to learn about how the monitors really aren't shot-proof like Ericsson claimed them to be. So in summation of my thoughts of Ericsson is that he has a brilliant, active mind that looks at problems and tries to find unique solutions, solutions that no one could ever think of. And yet, in practicality, there's always something not quite perfect with those inventions. Anyway, he's going to die on March 8th, 1882, and he's buried in Sweden in Värmland. So that's my story about John Ericsson. Does anyone have any questions?